Good evening. I'm Vincent Price. Tonight, a very special event here on Mystery. The most famous Sherlock Holmes story of them all, The Hound of the Baskervilles. In late 19th century London, the serialized adventure of Holmes in Strand magazine made Arthur Conan Doyle a world-renowned and very wealthy author. But by 1893, he tired of his creation and killed him off in The Final Problem. Holmes fans were devastated. They clamored for more, but the author was adamant. He wanted time for what he called more important work. No more Holmes. For 8 years, Conan Doyle wrote historical novels and conducted research into psychic phenomena. Then, during a golfing holiday in 1901, a friend told him the legend of a supernatural hound that haunted the Devonshire moors. Conan Doyle was soon fast at work on a new story and wrote to a friend, "I have the idea of a real creeper, full of surprises." The result was The Hound of the Baskervilles. Conan Doyle insisted that Holmes was still dead and that this was merely an earlier, unchronicled adventure. Well, who cared? The public went wild and lined up for blocks at the Strand offices for each new installment. For here was their beloved Holmes again in a blockbuster story that had everything. A supernatural legend and a dark old house on the edge of the moors, a murderer at large, and plenty of mysterious sights and sounds. No wonder it remains the most popular Sherlock Holmes story to this day. The Hound of the Baskervilles.
Hello and welcome to the LBC Irregulars, a story-by-story review of the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes series produced by Granada Television between 1984 and 1994. I'm your host, Kathy Bright, and do I have a treat for you. Sadly, Jared is unable to join tonight, so I have asked the original host of the show, Mr. Gene Hendricks, to join me as co-host. So, Gene, welcome back to LBC Irregulars. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Just hang on one second. I've been trying to find this old black boot of mine, and oh wait, here, give me that.
You found it. So, tell everybody what you've been up to since you moved on from the show.
Oh, just the normal stuff. I did some voice acting. I've been guesting on other people's podcasts. Teaching my daughter how to drive, got divorced.
Well, I can relate to at least one of those things. Well, it sounds like part of it's all been good. Teaching her how to drive. How's that been going?
Actually, it's been going very well. She's taken it really easy initially and is now to the point where she can drive the entire way to or from school. And I don't even come near the emergency brake anymore, so she's doing really well.
Oh, yes, if they only really had those, could you imagine? Crazy. All right, well, let's introduce our guest. Joining us on tonight's adventure through Sherlock Holmes is our resident Brit himself, Mr. Alan J. Porter. Good evening, Alan. How are you?
I'm doing good, Kathy. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me back to talk Holmes once again. Always enjoy a good 221B conversation. We didn't see too much of 221B in this.
No, we did not. And I could not have two more perfect guests for this particular episode. On this episode, we're going to be discussing what is probably the most well-known, definitely the most adapted, of the 4 crime novels written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. It has been adapted as a radio series, television episodes, a progressive rock album. We need to check that out, Alan. Stage productions, movies, and even video games. If you're still curious, we're going to be talking about none other than the Hound of the Baskervilles. So, I have a question for you guys. What was the first version of Hound of the Baskervilles that you remember either seeing or hearing? What was your first experience with Hound of the Baskervilles?
Well, mine is probably the same as a lot of people's, Basil Rathbone. That one, I don't I don't remember if I saw it on a television broadcast or anything, but I know for a fact that was one of the VHS tapes that we had. We had that one and The Woman in Green.
For you young people, VHS is predates DVDs.
Back in the olden times, we had these things as magnetic tape. But yeah, that's the one that I've seen. Definitely remember seeing it first. And it's probably the one I've seen the most often, including when I did a watch through of quite a few adaptations of Hound of the Baskervilles ahead of this. More on that later.
Alan, what about you?
I'd be the same, Basil Rathbone, but even pre-VHS days. My grandmother used to have a great thing every Sunday afternoon. I'd go over to her apartment and we'd watch old black and white movies and whatever was on TV. She was the one who introduced me to Tarzan and Alan Quatermain and all sorts of characters through these old black and white movies that whatever was on TV. And I think that was my introduction to Hound of the Baskervilles. Probably even my introduction to Holmes, thinking about it, was way back in the day. Seeing it on whatever it was, BBC or ITV or whatever, the multitude of two channels we had in the UK, one or the other, and on a rainy Sunday afternoon in my grandmother's apartment.
Yeah, I think I would agree with y'all. I think anybody in the age range of 40 to 70 is probably, that's the one that was on TV all the time. So that's the one we kind of probably all got started with. Well, all right, let's get to it. Let's start talking about Hound of the Baskervilles.
All right, now it is time for Kathy to give us the recap of our story for this episode. If you are not familiar with the Hound of the Baskervilles, and really who isn't familiar with Hound of the Baskervilles nowadays, you might just get your ending spoiled.
A Dr. Mortimer has enlisted the help of Holmes and Watson to aid in solving the mysterious and possibly supernatural death of Sir Charles Baskerville. Many believe that the family is cursed, so Mortimer would like protection for his friend and heir to the Baskerville estate from this rumored demonic hound. Due to a current case, Sherlock is unable to leave London, so he sends John in his stead to investigate. John and Henry Baskerville discover that the house servants have been helping an escaped murderer that is hiding in the moor. Could this murderer be what frightened Sir Charles Baskerville to death? Is there a supernatural curse on the Baskerville family? Does the curse involve a demonic hound roaming the mist-covered moors of Dartmoor? Continue on this journey with us to find out the answer to these questions and many more.
And now it is time for some highs, lows, and what does, where we each take a look at the good, the bad, and the meh of the episode. Alan, why don't you start us off?
Okay, I'm going to give a high on this one and give a big shout out to my man Edward Hardwick as John Watson, because he carried this whole thing. I think this was filmed around the time that Jeremy Brett was starting to get ill, and you can tell that in his performance, and I think Edward Hardwick really stepped up to the plate. In the story, Holmes is off screen for a fair amount of time, but really I think this whole production revolved around Edward Hardwick and his performance, and I think he did a brilliant job of both the subtle stuff and the more adventurous stuff as well. I think it was his best performance. I mean, he's great in the series anyway. For me, they are the quintessential Holmes and Watson, but I think in this story, he carried the production, I think. So I'm going to give him a big shout out on that. I loved at the beginning his thing where he took Mortimer's cane and he tried to do his own deductions of it, and then sort of, Holmes shut him down and told him he got it completely wrong, but he took it well. He even took it well when Holmes was like, this is going to be extremely dangerous, so I'm going to stay here in London and you can go off and I'm going to send you into the jaws of danger while I stay here in London. And the fact that he was sort of almost volunteered over dinner and he sort of just took it. He's like, oh, okay, I'll go. I'll pack my service revolver and off I'll go. And just the way he took the new Lord Baskerville under his protection, but also knew when to step out, when to be discreet, when to get in the way, when to be proactive. So, yeah, I just thought he did a great job. Edward Hardwick did a great job, I think, of actually really pushing Watson to the fore in this story and making it more of a Watson story, I think, than a Holmes story. And for good reasons, with what was happening with Jeremy Brett. And also, there was stuff around the production, and we'll probably get onto this my next round, but you could tell they were maybe a bit stretched on budget on this one as well, trying to do a 2-hour movie with a 1-hour TV budget. Yeah, I'll stop waffling now. But Edward Hardwicke, I think, really just totally impressed me on this one. He did in every other episode, but this one in particular, I thought was an absolute standout.
I will concur with everything that Alan just said. And as I normally do, a Watson watch is my first high-low what the. I mean, you couldn't have a better Watson watch than this entire film, right? So, and like Alan said, the subtlety, he mentioned how he took it when Sherlock was like, oh, it's going to be dangerous, so I'm going to send you instead. But the look on his face when Sherlock was like, I'm really going to be happy to have you back safe. And that look on Watson's face of, he really does care about me. It is odd to me that the most famous story of Sherlock Holmes has the least amount of Sherlock Holmes in it. I kind of never understood that.
Yeah, I will say, this is slightly going off topic, but I just want to pick up on what you said there. I have never understood why this is the most popular of the Sherlock Holmes stories. And maybe because it's the Basil Rathbone movie and that is so good.
I wonder if it leans a little more horror than...
Yeah, I think it's more of a linear action adventure horror story than it is a cerebral problem-solving story or whatever. For me, this is not a Sherlock Holmes story. It's a horror. It happens to have Sherlock Holmes in it. And like I said, I've never really understood why it's the most popular. I think in some ways that may be because it could be the easiest one to adapt. It's like I said, it's a pretty much straightforward linear story. If you're filming it, it's relatively easy, like they did here, to create a moors in a studio and stuff. You don't have to do too much set dressing or too much period stuff. You can do it relatively easily, I think. But yeah, like I said, when I look at the whole Holmes canon, it always bemuses me as to why this is the Holmes story that's the most well known. I mean, Gene, do you have any thoughts on that as to...
I've watched, like I said, a lot of adaptions of this, and there's just, like you said, it's straightforward. It's, okay, there's kind of a mystery, but it's more about the tour of Dartmoor and meeting all these interesting people and everything. And it's amazing the kind of twists that they can put on it. Because my high for this round is actually Laura Lyons. That is a character who was in all the adaptions I've watched, only in one other one. And in that one, she was still married. Her artist husband was actually a character in it, played by Brian Blessed. So you can imagine the kind of presence that was.
That must have been a subtle performance.
Oh, yeah, yes. But they twist it because, Brian Blessed, he has this big black beard. The guy in the cab in London had a big black beard. So, he must be involved. And they twist these things around, and it's always the same plot, but the how you get there changes in all of them. But the fact that Laura Lyons in this one was Franklin's daughter, estranged, her husband left her, Sir Charles set her up as a typist and all this, and she was the reason he was out there to be killed. It's straight out of the book. So I really, really appreciated them doing it in this production.
Alan, do you have anything for a second round of a high, low, or a what the? Or any other thoughts of what we've gone over in the first round?
It's sort of a bit of a low. I just touched on it with the budget. I don't know what it is with this one, because I said, Jeremy Brett and Edward Hardwicke, to me, are the definitive Holmes and Watson. But this felt very flat, felt very slow. I don't know if it was down to the direction. It seems to take everybody a long time to do everything, whether it was getting out of a train carriage or walking through the hall. Everything seemed to be happening pretty much in slow motion. The sets, some of the period sets were good, but other stuff was bad. I mean, the Hound was terrible. I mean, you take a Great Dane and paint it with phosphorus, and then use a big mask for the attack sequences. It just didn't work. This is, again, the Brit in me. That was not filmed on Dartmoor. Even when they did the outdoor shots on the moors, that was the Yorkshire moors. It was not Dartmoor. I can tell you, I've been on Dartmoor. That was not Dartmoor. By the way, Dartmoor is lovely. Not many demonic hounds, but the ponies are wonderful.
This is why we have Alan on the show, ladies and gentlemen.
That roam wild on Dartmoor. And there's some great pubs on the top of Dartmoor. If you ever read the Jamaica Inn story, Jamaica Inn pub on the top of the moors is great. Sorry, we used to drive across Dartmoor a lot of times going on down to holidays in Cornwall. So Dartmoor is in the southwest. This was clearly filmed in the Yorkshire Moors, which is in the northeast. So about as diametrically opposed as you can actually get from the real location. And some of it was clearly done in the studio. They would have normally done outside. So I don't know. Like I say, it just, and maybe part of it was because I think, as I said, Jeremy Brett was clearly not on form. His performance seemed a little subdued and stiff.
Especially for Jeremy Brett.
Especially for Jeremy Brett, yeah. So, yeah, I haven't watched this adaptation in a long time, probably since actually it first came out. And to me, it felt like the weakest episode in all the series today. I don't know why. It just felt slow. It just felt flat. And I didn't really get engaged in it. I will tell you, Jill picked her phone up halfway through and started playing on her phone. She's as big a Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes fan as I am. So I can't really put my finger on it. It just seems to be lots of little things that just sort of added up to a disappointing viewing experience.
I'm wondering if part of that was the, hey, this is a big story, we need to make it 2 hours thing. And if it was pared down to a normal episode length, it would have been quicker. You wouldn't.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I think it felt like they were padding and stretching, and they did cut out certain scenes from the story, I think. And it was very much London and Dartmoor. There was none of the other stuff, if I remember rightly. There's quite a while since I read the story, but there's other scenes of, like, the new Lord Baskerville arriving, the stuff at the docks. There was a very brief bit of that, but not much. I think there was a chase in London, wasn't it? I mean, it was a longer chase.
You had an abbreviated part of that where Holmes chases after the cab, but they cut out the entire bit with the cabbie coming in and saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm Mr. Sherlock Holmes." Yeah.
So, like I said, it felt to me like they were trying to do a 2-hour movie with a 1-hour budget, and then I think the direction. Can't remember who the director was, but I don't think the direction was as good or as sharp as it normally was. I would say the cast did a great job with what they've got, what they had, but it just didn't really translate into. It didn't feel like a horror movie. It didn't grab me. There was no real feeling of tension. So, yeah.
I'm going to piggyback a little off that on this round. I kind of understand what you mean by it's a little slow. It's not as action-adventure horror. I tended to nod off kind of midway through once we got more information on the servant and who the escaped criminal was. And it's 2 different stories. I mean, I understand it. They were trying to make us think that that's who was scaring everyone and all of that. But I kind of started nodding off at that point. We'll also agree that towards the high is, I think it was cast very well. Oh, especially Stapleton. When I found out that he was the same actor who is from Game of Thrones that played Randall Tawley, Sam's unreasonably awful father. I'm like, that's all I could see now from watching that. But I think the cast was great. And like Alan said, with what they had story-wise, I think, they did a good job. Gene, do you have anything for round 2?
Yeah, this one's going to be a kind of a what the. And this isn't so much for this adaptation, it's for the original story. And I'm a dog owner. I currently have German Shepherds numbers 4 and 5. So I've owned big dogs for a long time. And when Mortimer is initially consulting Holmes, and he says, "Oh, there were footprints." Well, man's or woman? Mr. Holmes, there were footprints of a gigantic hound. How can you tell it was a hound? Dog footprints are dog footprints. If I showed you the footprint of my original German Shepherd, Thor, who weighed 125 pounds, you would say that's an enormous dog footprint. Okay, can you tell it's a shepherd, a hound, a terrier, a mastiff? No, it's a dog footprint. That's it.
I'll address that. That's a language. That's a 2 nations divided by a common language thing. Hound is actually synonymous for dog.
See, there we go.
Hound is a general term that's often used instead of dog. All dogs are hounds.
It's like if you're in certain areas of the United States where you're asked what kind of Coke you want and you can order a Pepsi.
Yeah. Yeah.
That completely makes sense. I do want to give credit to that. I'm assuming it was an English Springer Spaniel. that dog was adorable, and the way it kept trying to get petted in that scene.
Yeah, it was not following stage direction, was it? It was like,
no, it wasn't.
That is exactly like my dog Midnight. I'll be sitting on the couch, and she'll come over and flop down next to me, stick her head under my hand. Yeah, that's perfect dog behavior, yes.
Oh, by the way, I also love that when Holmes actually, declared that the chew marks were from a spaniel while he was, looking out the window watching the dog get out of the cabinet. Watson thought he'd just deduced it from the teeth marks. I thought that was great.
Yes.
Right. Because he believed if anybody could do that, it would be Sherlock.
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody have anything? I mean, this is a huge story. I feel like there's more we need to be discussing with this whole, we can have a third or fourth round. Anybody have any additional thoughts, questions, concerns?
Well, I have a couple bits of trivia, seeing as how I'm standing in for Jared here.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Go for it.
So, Alan, you had mentioned that the budget problems in this. Well, it turns out that several of the scenes of, the filler scenes were lifted from another episode. So, we had the carriage on the dark lane, the hansom arriving at a large building, Holmes disappearing into the fog at the station. They were all lifted. And this is very appropriate, Kathy, for where you just were, from the Greek interpreter.
Oh, nice.
And the other bit of trivia I had is the edition that I read this out of, the Casebook of Sherlock Holmes, is annotated. And in this, now keep in mind that this was published in 1968. So, back then, it was talking about how much money Sir Henry was inheriting. And the sum is £740,000. Now, it tells you approximately how much it was back then. But I figured I'm going to do the calculation for today. So £740,000, keeping in mind that the story was published in 1902, today would be £113,987,048, which, for you Americans out there, would be $144,991,525. I would say that is definitely money someone's going to kill over.
Absolutely. Can I just get a tenth of that?
Yeah, that would be nice. I'll even sell for 100th of that. I'm not going to be greedy.
As I said, that's a nice chunk of change, which actually makes Watson's reaction to the just under $1 million. I also like the fact that they just sort of in the adaptation just went, well, it's just under $1 million. I mean, they didn't actually give it an exact number, which for Holmes is actually surprising, because you think Holmes would be the person who would actually, when he said, do you know how much it is? He would have it down to the penny, not just say, oh, it was just under $1 million.
Yeah. Well, I think that probably goes to show, because I think we've discussed on another episode that he's pretty much rich. I think it was the episode you were on, Alan.
Yeah.
He's very wealthy, so, those nickels and dimes probably don't really mean much to him.
Yeah, but it's within his nature to be very precise about everything. So I don't know, I just think it just seemed, that line just seemed slightly out of character.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that might have been Brett just saying, because he delivered the line while he was walking.
Yeah.
So it's probably, I can't remember that number, just under $1 million.
Yeah.
When I was talking about the casting, I really think that Henry Baskerville, I really like that actor. I think he did such a good job, because he carried the other half of this.
I thought he was very good too. Not quite as Southern as I read him from the story. I think the story is a bit more Western Southern gentleman, if I remember rightly. But yeah, I think this guy came over to me as a bit more, I'm going to mess around with the accents here, I'm going to get it horribly wrong, but he seemed more sort of Boston, East Coast to me than Southern. And the dynamic between him and Watson was very good. That sort of almost instant friendship between the two of them was excellent, I thought. So. Yeah,
I was kind of confused in the adaptation versus, I didn't get through the whole story, but at the beginning, I was like, if the cane is there, how do we not know whose cane it was? I feel like the adaptation is a little hazy to the fact that he was in the apartment when they were not in the apartment. I was so confused. I'm like, why are we trying to figure out whose cane this is if he's been in the apartment? But it was much more clear when I was reading the story.
Yeah, I must admit, I was a bit confused by that. I assume he'd been over the previous night and they were out and he just left, see Mrs. Hudson and sort of left it.
Yeah, because he had come when they were out and forgot to leave his calling card, but left his cane. And that's why Holmes says at one point that he's absent-minded.
Oh, okay.
Left this, it's better explained in some of the other adaptions because you get a little more there with Holmes saying, oh, well, he even goes into the width of the teeth marks on the cane. That's something I found interesting in the Basil Rathbone version. And that's the only one that did this, is Holmes says, oh, well, you own a very large dog, Dr. Mortimer. Mortimer's, no, it's a small spaniel. They're trying to make him a suspect. It's kind of weird how they were doing it. But then again, you also have Holmes at the very end of that one calling for the needle from Watson.
Yeah.
Completely out of character because Watson doesn't like him doing it.
No. Actually, just go back to the casting and stuff, playing well with what they had. I thought that the couple who played the Barrymores, the butler and his wife, the unspoken interchange between them about the fact that they were clearly up to something, which we eventually find out is saving food and giving it to her brother who's on the run from prison and stuff. But, that thing over dinner where she, picks up the carcass of the chicken and she just, looks at the butler and all he does is give the minutest of sort of nods of ascension and then she sort of scuttles away with the chicken carcass and stuff. You could very early on think about he was our only hope for the future and how that eventually comes out of the fact Sir Charles was going to give them sort of money to go off, open a pub or whatever. I thought there was a lot of really good interplay between them. A lot that was done, like I said, unsaid, but clearly communication between the two of them that there was something going on. And I think part of the thing with this, again, there was hints of red herrings, but none of them ever really played out strong enough to actually divert you away from the main story. So when things happened, they weren't really a surprise. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I was going to say, in relation to the Barrymores, is the way, I love the way Watson side-eyed, especially him, the entire time. He just looked at him every time he walked, when he was walking out, or was it right before dinner, when he walked in and he just kind of looked at him. Watson was definitely extremely suspicious of him the entire first half of that.
Yeah, he knew something was going on, that he was picking up on the undertone that there was something going on.
Well, I think it was picking up on the undertone. Also, it's we just chased this guy with a black beard in London. This guy has a black beard.
Yeah.
So, this could be the guy. We don't know.
Yeah, they never really closed that loop out in this adaptation of who the guy in the cab was, beyond the Watson saying, who was that?
Yeah. No, actually, I don't think in any of the ones that... Oh, no, there was the only other one that had Laura Lyons in it, the one with Brian Blessed. They do point out, it was Stapleton in a false beard. Right. But none of the other ones have done that, including this one. It's just some guy in London. And
some random guy, that's following them, yeah.
Yeah, they don't explain it.
Do we know exactly how long Sherlock was in Dartmoor versus part of the time Watson thought he was still in London? I was never really clear, did he go immediately after Watson left, or did he actually stay in London for a while?
I think it had to be pretty, if not immediately, maybe the next train or the next day. But I think it had to be there quite a while to, arrange with the postmistress to pick up, the letters. And actually that, the little cave that he set up in, when you've got nice armchairs and a table, cooking stove in there. He's obviously worked with somebody to furnish his little hideaway. So, I think he'd been in there for quite a while. Oh, by the way, I love the thing with Holmes cooking his stew and offering it to Watson.
That's quite disgusting, Holmes.
Must have been, especially for a guy who's been in the army, to turn it down.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it was the last episode you were on, Alan. It was, I don't remember what episode it was.
Oh, the pub, yeah.
Yes, the pub. Yeah. Continued to eat the food even though he said it was horrible. But yet he wasn't about to try Sherlock's stew.
Yeah, he'd eat, what was it, Sweden potato pie or something in a horrible pub, but he wouldn't touch Holmes's stew, yeah.
It did look pretty gross.
It did, didn't it?
Yeah, but I like how they kept you guessing on where Holmes was, because he was on a train occasionally and whatnot, so he did travel back to London.
Yeah, because they actually showed him on the train and they did the announcement coming into London, which, by the way, was nowhere near. One, it didn't look like it, and two, when you're coming into London on the train, there are so many stations in London. You do not arrive in London. You arrive at Paddington, King's Cross, whatever the station is.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to announce, you're going into London.
Yeah. So he had to go back in order to find out who discovered this butterfly.
Yeah.
So Watson told him that as, if he discovered it, I will know his exact name.
Yeah.
And that's something else that they cut out, because apparently in the book, and this is not mentioned anywhere else, Stapleton and his wife, under their real names, were running a school in northern England, and there was some type of controversy there. Something happened that they lost a mess of money or something. It's been a few weeks since I read it, so I don't remember exactly. But then they fled, and that's when they took the assumed names and did the, she's my sister thing. Because if you go from a married couple to a married couple, it's kind of easy to track, but married couple to brother and sister is a little confusing.
Yeah, because I was very curious what her motivation was to be a part of this plan.
She would get beaten.
Or stuck in a room, I guess, tied up.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts? Any other tidbits?
Well, there is one other thing that they cut out. In this one, they had Mortimer with them at the end. In the book, it's Lestrade.
Oh, okay. So they just bring him in at the end of the story.
Holmes purposely writes him to come because someone needs to arrest Stapleton. So Holmes writes Lestrade and said, no, come on down. And he's the one at the end where they're trying to shoot the Hound. And then he was going to arrest Stapleton. And
the other part of this one is there's no real justice at the end of it. I mean, the Stapleton goes and gets drowned, which was so horribly foreshadowed early on.
When he was talking about the pony.
Yeah, don't walk across there, you'll get sucked in. It's like, well, we all know what's going to happen at the end now. And what does Holmes do? He takes the person who's supposedly charged that he's meant to be looking after and basically exposes him to getting attacked by the Hound and mauled by the Hound. Basically tells him to walk across the moors in the dark and go get attacked, and then we'll stop it. Very trusting of Sir Henry to go do that. But really, it's not a very satisfactory end. And I know not all Holmes stories are very satisfactory ends in terms of justice, but this one just didn't really seem that good. That, Holmes exposed the person he was meant to be protecting to danger and physical attack and stuff, and then the actual perpetrator got away and basically was killed of his own arrogance. It wasn't anything that Holmes did.
It wasn't very satisfying. It was more just karma playing its part.
Yeah.
But that's what he gets for watching that pony just...
Yeah, he should have helped the pony, and then he would have
Exactly.
known how to get out. Yeah.
All right. Is it time? Should we move on?
I think it's about rating time.
Ratings? All right. So, overall, what did we think of this episode? Well, we just happen to have a system in place that helps us rate each episode. On a scale of 1 to 5 pipes, 5, you loved it, it solved your mystery.
Aha!
4, it was really good. 3, it was all right. 2, you did not like it. 1, you hated it. It threw you off of Reichenbach Falls. All right, guys. Alan, how would you rate this episode?
Like I said, it sort of left me feeling a bit disappointed, a bit flat. It had some really high points, mainly in the cast and the acting from most of the cast. Like all these things, when they mess around with the geography and it's not right, throws me a bit. So I think it's a 3 for me. It was okay, but I think I'll go back and watch the Basil Rathbone one because that's a much better version of Hound of the Baskervilles.
I understand. I think I'm going to join you on a 3. I really, for nostalgia reasons, kind of want it to be a 4, but I don't know. If I could do 3.5, I mean, I feel like I should be able to. It's my show now. But...
Sure. You want.
Jared keeps shooting me down for that. I'm going to give it a very high 3. How about that? We're going to give it a 3+. Gene, what about you?
Yeah, I'm going to be right there with you on a 3. Out of all of the adaptions I've watched, this is the most accurate to the book, but it's too long. That's basically what it boils down to. If you had an editor to bring it down, even an hour and 15 would have been a nice, crisp way to go. I don't need to see them go up every step in Franklin's house. You don't have to show me that. I can trust that they get from the ground floor to the roof. Okay, I'm there. So yeah, it just overall is a 3.
I did like that guy, though.
Oh, he was fun. He was really fun. I like him better than the one in the Rathbone version. Because the one in the Rathbone version, he seems just like he's mean to be mean. Whereas this guy he's having a ball. He's screwing people over left and right, but he's having fun doing it. Before we ride off in our handsome cab for this episode, let's thank our Crusaders Club members who help pay the rent here at 221B. These are the fine folks who have joined our crusade. They enjoy exclusive access to special Longbox episodes, voting to help determine show content, and so much more. So here are the folks reaping the benefits and giving some much appreciated support to the show. Alan Wright,
Angelica Wolf,
Auburn Elvis,
Bill Beer,
Bill Dunleavy,
Braxton Underwood,
Captain Entropy,
Clark Westfield,
Clinton Robeson,
Dave Collins,
Ezra Gallo,
Gary Viola,
some weirdo named Gene Hendricks. Oh wait, that's me.
Gerald Green,
Heinz K,
Jason Keene,
Jason Lady,
Jeff Poiter,
Jeremy L,
the infamous Jim Jarman,
Jim Neal,
Joe Thomas,
our good friend and Dr. John Watson,
Josh Strickland,
Candace Ward,
and somebody called Kathy Bright. No idea who she is.
Mark Ross, a.k.a. Buck Trent,
Matt and Lizzie Passo,
Maxwell Traver,
Miranda W.,
P.D. Devons,
Paul Hicks,
Rick from Jeff and Rick Present,
Rob Morgan,
Samantha Maney,
Sean Urbanski,
Spidey67,
Spreadsheet,
Steve Cronin,
Equestrian Tim Price,
Tony Pennington,
and Toronto Cop.
If we missed anyone on our list, we apologize. Please keep in mind that we record these episodes well in advance of release, so if you're a recent addition, we should be adding you soon. But still, no worries. Just let us know that we missed you by sending an email to contact@longboxcrusade.com and we'll straighten it out. As a reminder, you can become a Crusaders Club member by heading on over to patreon.com and searching for Longbox Crusade. For as little as $1 a month, you get access to the amazing world of the Crusaders Club. Come and check it out.
Offer not available in all areas, especially for Jason.
Well, that's going to wrap up another episode of LBC Irregulars. We'd love to hear from you if you're familiar with any variation of these Sherlock Holmes stories, including the Granada adaptations. Longbox Crusade can be reached on X, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Longbox Crusade. Our email is contact@longboxcrusade.com. We can also be reached by phone. The number 707-532-5269. That's 707-532-LBOX. Gene, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Well, if you want to contact me, I'm on all social media platforms, even some of the ones you probably have never heard of. And you can find me at E.R. Hendricks VA. And you can also look up my website, same thing, erhendricksva.com. Kathy, how about you?
I can be found on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all the social medias at AUKathy2418, and that's Kathy with a K. Alan?
And you can find me on most of the social media platforms at Alan J. Porter or my website, alanjporter.com, which has a link to our online bookstore where you can pick up a couple of copies of Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, which might have a few stories written by yours truly. And if you just want to keep up with what I've got going on in terms of writing, podcasts, etc., you can sign up for my free weekly newsletter at alanjporter.substack.com.
Awesome. Be sure to join us next quarter as we begin Season 5 of the Granada series with episodes The Disappearance of Lady Frances Carfax and The Problem of Thor Bridge. See you next time. Bye.
The game's afoot.
Say bye, Alan.
Bye.